Lawyers were being embarrassed and judges were being embarrassed. The Lawyers Association bought the newspaper and then slandered the truthful language. And she had to work there and either slander or get fired. Well, she got fired because she wouldn't slander. Then she wanted compensation, got herself hooked up with 4 other scam artists, where they're better known as grifting, and then went ahead and downloaded and thought they could steal and not get caught. And they got caught and they went to prison. And if you read the article, it's all up and down. Emotionally, it's a disturbed individual who did some bad things. And then wrote this article and put it up there on the internet. I have a disclaimer up there as to all the different scam issues. I've never hurt anybody or taken anything from anybody. People that go into court half-baked get half-baked when they come out. If you don't have knowledge, like I said, you go from that wall to that wall. How many mistakes you get to make? If you don't study, this is not a 10-hour program. This is not a 50-hour program or a 100-hour program. This takes an average person 200 hours to become proficient, just to understand what this sentence means and how to break it down. Most of my students that are good have 2,000 to 10,000 hours of study. I've got 74,000 hours of study, and I've been at this for 30 years. But this is my calling in life. This is my job. This is my contract with my God, that I will be a teacher and teach quantum correct mathematical facts. And that's my spirit. I want to make sure there's a world for my kids and a world for my grandkids. And everybody that has seen this program, it changes you. Now, another thing is the mirror. Just like I had made a contract with myself when I was 18 years old. A husband and a wife, or a boyfriend and a girlfriend, you have problems. When I talk to you, I can't see my facial expressions. I can't see my eye contact. I can't see who I am and what I look like as how I present myself to you. Nor can you see what you look like talking to me or looking at me. I can see from your facial expressions, your body language, your smiles, if I'm making sense to you because you smile back at me, because you're learning something, because the mind is always happy when they're active. So if you have a problem with yourself, stand in front of a mirror and talk to yourself if that's the only person you trust. If you have a partner, or if you have children and you want to have a discussion with your kids, don't talk to them face to face. Stand in front of a mirror. Now you got 4 people there. You have to look yourself in the mirror, you have to look yourself in the eye, and you've got to talk to yourself as well as the person standing next to you. You have to see and listen to yourself. Right now you just listen to yourself, but you don't see yourself. And when you see your own body language, 80% of communications is body language. So now you get to see who you are and how you perceive yourself to the world when you talk to yourself. Then you'll learn much more about who you are. And whether you're talking to your child or talking to your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend, you'll be able to solve communications because you see body language and you get eye contact feedback. It's very powerful information. And it makes a difference between getting a divorce and staying together. Another thing is you are what you eat. I can take any one of you in this audience, put you on meat and potatoes for 90 days, and I will create a personality and a body chemistry type that will perform a specific way. I can then take you off meat and potatoes and put you on vegetables. And in 90 days, I will completely change you and you will be a different personality and a different person. I can then take you off of vegetables and give you nothing but fruit. And in 90 days, I will change you again, and then I will put you on junk food. Crackers, potato chips, whatever, you know. And I will change you again. Take a husband and a wife. They live together, they eat together, they work together, and then along comes the 7-year cycle. 80% of all human beings, both men and women, go through a chemical change every 7 years. It takes 14 months for this chemical change to take place. The chemical change will start very slow, and about the 4th month you get into it, you want to change your diet, change your clothes, change your job. And by the time this thing accelerates itself, you want to get a divorce at the end of 14 months. You want to change partners, you want to change jobs, and you stop eating together. And the wife might be at home feeding, doing a normal meal, meat and potatoes and vegetables for the children, and the husband's out eating junk food or sandwiches or drinking beer or something and has a different diet because of a work schedule change. And all of a sudden, like, his body chemistry changes. When the body chemistry changed, the scent, S-C-E-N-T, changes. And all of a sudden, like, the attractiveness that kept you together when you got married because you were attracted to each other's scent and condition of thinking because your chemistries were the same, have now grown apart. You don't smell the same, you don't think the same, your personalities are different, and all of a sudden, like, you're living with a stranger. And after a while, it becomes so intolerable you can't stay together anymore. So if you're aware of chemistry changes, scent changes, food changes, sleeping patterns, and you sit down and you discuss it, you can get back to where you were. You can normalize your individual. See, in the old days, in the covered wagon days before we had all the instant transportation, a husband and wife would go out on a farm, they'd eat the same food, live together from cradle to grave. They didn't ever think about divorce because they were partners. Chemically, they were partners. Today, we are separated. We sit on computers, we don't talk to each other. We develop all these differences. And the world breaks down, we all become individuals. So you can become anything you want to become in life. But you got to know what your diets are, you got to know what your personality is, your scent, you have to pay attention to things. Take your vitamins, your glucosamine, know about zappers to stay healthy. There's 5 forms in life to take place. Your first rule is physical and mental health. Your second one is contract. You must honor all contracts that you make, because if you honor your contracts, your physical and mental health will be intact. The third thing is you must take care of the things you create. In other words, children, if you have children. Because you created an entity that's going to grow up, because if you take care of your children, they are a reflection of who you are, which affects your contracts and your honor, which affects your physical and mental health. The fourth thing is your job. You have to work. You have to have a job to support the children. Oh wait, I got that wrong. Your job comes third, and then the children come fourth. Because you got to have the job to support your health, to support your contract. Because if you don't have money, you can't make a contract. And then your physical and mental health. And you get these things out of track, the whole thing falls apart. And then the fifth thing on the list is your spouse. They are an independent individual. Whether it be men or women, that comes 5 on the line because they have the same rules and regulations. They have to maintain their physical and mental health. They have to maintain their contracts that they honor. They have to maintain their jobs and ability to feed themselves, earn money, earn respect, earn whatever it takes in the world, and you both work together to take care of the children. And if you keep these 5 rules intact in your life, you will find that you will be successful throughout, and you will get through all the hardships you have in life. Anybody questions on some of these philosophies and issues? There's a lot of, I specialize in like 115 different fields because of the amount of reading I do. I've been a day trader in the stock market for 41 years. So I research companies that are developing medical technologies, sciences, engineering that are futuristic. And then I cross-reference this thing. Sometimes a company will develop something in 1980, for instance, 30 years ago, and it failed. It doesn't work in society. Well, next generation comes along, and then now it's 2000. The same company wants to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going, that company is going to fail. It looks really good at first, I'll short that company because the project doesn't work. And it'll go high because it's an idea which nobody remembers 20 years earlier, and it'll slide off into oblivion and be worth nothing. So I'll make money on it. So by doing all this reading, when you put money on the table, $50,000, your learning curve changes when you want to study an object that you're going to buy and invest that much money in it. So you learn in depth. You learn about how the company is run. You learn about mechanics, corporate structure. That's why when I come into a country, I can go ahead and set up like the Origines. I can sit down, I can show them how to set up corporation, how to write contracts, how to have a corporate trust. That's what we did in Hawaii. Got the Hawaiians organized, had a corporate trust, educated them how to read and write in quantum, how to run a business as a corporation, have a board of directors, have elections, elect judges, have license plates, driver's license, insurance, so they have the right to travel and communicate with each other. We're not just a bunch of unorganized yahoos. And because the United States government has recognized the Hawaiian Kingdom and their ability to organize on a responsible level under Robert's Rules of Order, they are functioning and growing as an independent entity, and Hawaii is getting back their identity to become a sovereign island again. But Hawaii is owned by the United States Postal Service, it's owned by the Japanese Postal Service, and it's owned by the Chinese Postal Service, as well as the Hawaii Postal Service. There's 4 entities on that island. So that's, it isn't what everybody thinks it is. Japan regards Hawaii as one of their states, so does China. And with 35% of the population is Chinese, and 35% is Japanese, and 20% is white, and the rest are Filipino and Hawaiian. So it's a melting pot in the Pacific. And they're cousins to you guys down here, so. Think of any questions before I start on this? Yes?
I think I heard on one of your discs that you're looking at the banks worldwide, and I think you're talking about a currency that you're setting.
Yeah, we're currently, since 1990, we went to the United Nations. We served 82 countries with bank treaties. This is a 115-page document, has all the notarized, the CPAS, the Sea Treaty, the Drug Law. Russell Gould and I created this here. We have all the postal treaties involved with that, as well as the bank constitutions, the bank transfer of money, all done in syntax language. There is no money in the syntax world. We deal strictly in gold, silver, and minerals. We currently have, I believe it's close to 400 million tons of 999 silica, which is used for all computers and TV screens in a single deposit in Wyoming. That's our mineral deposit for our bank. But we haven't touched it. It's just, it's in the ground. These are crystals that are 60 feet long and 8 feet diameter. And it was discovered in 1953 while elk hunting, back when there were elk in the Rocky Mountains. And then we wrote a quantumized land patents on the mineral deposit, and we filed that with the Department of Interior. And the Department of Interior tried to sue for that our mineral claims were irrelevant by saying, yeah, in what language you guys, the Department of Interior, say that they own it. They don't have any constitution. They don't have any correct sentence structure, communication, syntax. They even have a charter or an oath of office. And our claims were upheld at the federal court level. So we have access to these things if we want to go ahead and mine them. They started mining them last year. There's other areas around the world where gold and silver deposits have been contracted to go into a quantumized banking. Russell's currently overseeing that. We have activity taking place in Sydney, Auckland, Dubai, London, the insurance companies worldwide, with the Chinese on syntax banking. Everyone has the banks. They've had 10 years to study the information and get their people in order, but the whole world has to shift together. You can't have a banking truth and a banking fiction simultaneously, because the truth is going to disqualify all fiction. Last year we syntaxed the insurance and the mortgage contracts, which created the Great Depression in the United States. and collapsed our housing market. We had 5 million foreclosures taking place as a result of that. And so everyone's really upset, but it's got to change. I mean, it's got to get fixed. So we'll go ahead and we'll do this. So 10 minutes, 12. Yeah, we got 20 minutes. All right, this is a lawyer wrote this, and the lawyer who wrote this is got 4 wheels spinning in the mud and he's not moving anywhere. Now the adverb we is undefined. Will becomes the verb. Be making arrangements, which is a no contract word. So making is an adjective here, making arrangements to be a pronoun. Now for you, now he's calling the client a verb here. And he's calling his law firm a we. So the law firm is an adverb and the client is a verb. Where's my fact? Now to be is an adverb verb in future time, which means the possessive has been moved into the future. And then they put medical is medical exam. Instead of saying medical exam, it's medically examined, adding ly to make it an adverb, modifying the exam to be no contract as a verb in past time, and becomes a conjunction neutral. For assessments, which means no contract, MENT is contract. And they're going to make that into a coloring with what? With is a pronoun. So they're going to color nothing. And he said nothing here, so he's coloring nothing. A is an adverb, making a doctor to be a verb because doctors only practice. PRA means no contract. Doctors will write the reports in boxes. They will write it in adverb verb, italicize it, and double space it so that there is no medical report that you can come back and sue for malpractice. The doctor will guess about most of the things he puts down. Because he doesn't know the history of an individual, he can only see what's in front of him at the time and can't certify collectively what a car accident does to an individual. Short of seeing a broken bone or a ruptured organ, he has to guess about everything else. So they turn him into a verb. In due course becomes an adjective, an adverb, adjective, pronoun. But when you're dealing with an adverb over here, this adverb can make doctor to be an adjective and in to be the pronoun and due course to be an adverb verb, turning it into a dangling participle verb. Now, when all possible, an attorney, if I look at all the rest of the sentence structures that this attorney has written in 125 pages, if he ends sentences in a dangling participle verb, that means that this is his volition to never complete a sentence. And then this will be correct because it is associated with all the rest of the patterns that he has been creating. And so this top line here is a fiction. So is the bottom line a fiction, but this is a more correct fiction based on the other patterns and associations that an individual has done. So in a medical examination or an insurance claim, we would go ahead and take, how would you write this? The question is, how would you write this? We showed you what's wrong as a syntax sentence. Well, first off, we doesn't exist here. Will, we're not going to use that word because that is undefined. Be is undefined. Making is undefined. Arrangements is a future tense thing. It's a no contract word. That comes out. But if they're going to make an arrangement, you're going to have a contract. So the law firm is going to go ahead and have knowledge. Oh, this here is interfering with us. This is the word justice, Justice. Ju is no law, S is speak, Ti is title, Ce is judge. Judge title speaks no law. That's what justice means. You want justice? You get the same justice as everybody else gets. No law. That's one of the traps. You know how we found that? The dome in the state of Wisconsin has Lady Justice standing like this. It's a mosaic on the ceiling of our dome, our Capitol dome. And it's J-U-S-T-I-C-E. I'm going, why would you break a word up like that? So I looked up the symbols of J-U-S-T-I-C-E in the Masonic codes, and this is what it says. So they were advertising. And authority always runs backwards, so there it means judge title speaks no law. Okay. The implication is for you. To be is in future time. We don't want anything to do with that. We know we've got to have something to be a medical exam. So that's relevant, but that's a compound word. But a medical exam, EX means no. So for the law firm's knowledge of the client's damage is with the medical claim of, now assessment means no contract. We don't want to be assessed. Of the evidence doctor's irrelevant, due course is irrelevant. Of the evidence with the damages, body damages, possessive bodies damages, by a doctor. There, now that's a correct sentence. That one will hold up in court. That one will get you paid. So we don't want a doctor to do an exam. We want a doctor to certify the fact that there is a damage. In other words, show me a x-ray of a broken bone. That's physical. That's not an opinion. Proves that somebody has a headache. Anybody can say they have a headache. Prove it. Well, if you take a picture of an aneurysm or something that's a disorder within the brain, yes, we'll have physical proof of it. They can do a blood test and say your blood pressure is too high. You have too much creatinine in your blood. That'll cause a headache. Do you know what headaches are caused by? Two things. High blood pressure or low blood pressure, or you got to go to the bathroom. Because if you don't go to the bathroom, whether it be urine or feces, you got too much poison in your bloodstream. And there's another cause. If you have, if your flatworm creates too much feces in the cartilage, it'll create pressure in the spinal cord, better known as nitrogen. And if you take and you crack your neck and break the bubble, usually it takes about 3 seconds from the time that the nitrogen bubble removes itself from the spinal cord, your headache goes away. So sometimes it's just as simple as cracking your neck, going to the bathroom, or checking your blood pressure. If your blood pressure is either up or down, it means you have a chemical imbalance in your system due to probably your diet. Say again? You might need water, you might need coffee with little caffeine in it to jack you up a little bit, or some ginseng. You might need to calm yourself down. If you got hypertension, take some baking soda. Pull your pH down in your blood. Baking soda is great. You got jumpy legs, leg cramps, sore feet, any of those kind of things when you lay down. As soon as you lay down, your blood pressure in your legs changes. Goes from 180 down to 100. There's not enough circulation to remove the amino acids out of your bloodstream, you get leg cramps. take baking soda. It's the safest, cheapest cure-all that you can imagine. 15 seconds later after you drink it, it'll totally check your whole bloodstream.
What sort of dilution?
What's that?
What sort of dilution? Baking
I use a half a teaspoon in 4 ounces of water and drink it. That's enough to knock it out of you. Based on, I weigh 180 pounds, so that always takes care of me. If you're a 240-pound guy, you might want to take a whole teaspoon. Or a 300-pound person might need a whole teaspoon. 100-pound person, maybe a quarter of a teaspoon. Take whatever you need. If that's not enough and you still feel a little bit tight, take a little bit more. If you take too much, it'll make you feel like really weird for about 20 minutes, but your body will neutralize it. Yes, question.
If you're corresponding with a company or corporation or a bank or whatever, like with the first letter, it was understanding, we will be making arrangements for you to be medically examined for the assessment with the doctor in due course. I get that completely. I know what's coming up. If I receive something in the mail that said, for the law firm's knowledge of the client's damage I wouldn't understand that. So is there a place, what I'm saying is if you're writing in syntax to a corporation and you want to write it in truth English, and they don't understand what you're saying because they don't do syntax, well, where is the breakdown in the communication?
Write it both ways.
So you could write it this and then...
Sure, you can write it in adverb, verb, syntax, that you're used to, and then go ahead and say, well, we wrote it to you the same way a lawyer would, and make that statement. This is how a lawyer writes to you, this is how your lawyers read it.
So you can understand it.
And then syntax it and say, this is how many syntax mistakes you made, and this is what it looks like corrected. And give it to them both ways. Now, when we do lawsuits, the federal government requires us that we have cover pages on our lawsuits. When you file federal, you have the same rules down here as we do up in Wisconsin, or should I say the states. And they say, we won't file the papers unless you use our form. Same thing with process of service for notifying the clients, the individuals. Now, don't forget, you guys are schooled in syntax. The people you're talking to are not. And you know from your own experience that it takes a long time to learn this, so the guy you're serving is not going to be a spontaneous combustion of, bang, I understand this right away. So don't worry about it. Give him his papers in adverb verb, use the government's form, slap the quantum on the back. Give it to him both ways. That way you're protected under quantum, and they have the volition, if they show up, all service is good service. That's the rule. That's because the person shows up in court and says, I didn't get service, Your Honor. It says, well, if you didn't get service, what are you doing here? In other words, how did you find out to be here today? By his own confession that he is there shows that he got good service. Simple as that. Your volition, your performance is what makes the contract. When we graduate from judge school, you get a hat that says, if nobody's talking, everybody's walking. Which means we need people to confess to anything that they do and everything that they do. We need them to get into an argument of traverse. It's just like I say to you, what is your name? Your instinct is to tell me your name. The correct answer is, yours an adverb modifying the verb name. My name is not what? Is that a question or a statement? So you got 3 different questions I could ask there. And if you maintain a level of questioning, it's called a demur, to get to a conclusion, which is a contract of communications, and the judge knows you have the capacity to communicate with him, he's going to know not to get into this discussion with you because you're going to educate everyone else in the courtroom. This is a case that happened in Tampa, Florida. Man comes out of a bar, 1:30 in the morning, drunk, takes a leak in the bush, pees on a vice cop who's standing there, pees on his foot. So the vice cop steps out and arrests him for lewd and lascivious and going to the bathroom in public. Now this is his 3rd offense, so it's a mandatory 5 years in prison and a $2,500 fine in the state of Florida. And you think the guy to have a little bit more sense, you know, after being convicted twice of this same thing. So he's in court, and his friend who had came to my seminar calls me up and he says, hey Dave, you want to go to court with me today? And my buddy's going to court and he's facing 5 years in prison. And you see what you can do to help him. So there's roughly 100 people waiting to be heard in front of this court for traffic offenses, misdemeanors, little jaywalking offenses, you know. And the judge tells the bailiff to pass out these, you can plead guilty, not guilty, no contest. Okay, adverb, verb, and guilty means responsibility, which means no speak. So you can plead no speak, not guilty, which is adverb, verb, and a negative condition of making this a verb, or no contest, which means that my contest is a verb, and it's a no verb, or rather a no contest, which means a no contract. So which part of no don't we understand? So I went ahead and I take the form, and I corrected the 88 mistakes on the form. Then I assigned a Title 18, 1001, fictitious conveyance, under mail fraud to extort money, criminal activity under Title 42, 1985, subsection 1 for conspiracy, subsection 2 for obstructing evidence of witnesses, and subsection 3 for depriving evidence and witnesses for an act of racketeering under Title 18, section 1961. And then I said to the judge, you just caused a damage under Title 42, 1983 as a personal damage against this individual. Would you like to participate? The judge looking and he says, oh my God, he says, and he looks at all the people, there's 50 guys in the audience. And he goes, give this back to the man. I'm not going to accept it. And as soon as the bailiff got it, because he's the one passing it out, he crumples it up. My client goes, that's my evidence. I want my evidence. Judge says, that's your evidence. He says, yeah. He says, you guys made 88 mistakes. You tried to extort money from me. Judge says, give me that back. He looks at it and he says, all right. He signs the bottom of it. He says, how much money you got in your pocket? He says, I got $20. He says, $20 court cost. He looks at all the people in the audience and he goes, oh, we're going to do something different, bailiff. Lock that door. He says, every one of you in here, he says, if you pay $20 court costs, he says, all your cases are dismissed. We got speeding, drunk driving, lewd and lascivious, burglary. There's a couple of fights, disorderly conducts in bars. I mean, everybody in the room was facing hundreds of dollars and years in prison, and they all lined up and signed, paid $20 and got out there and had all their cases vacated. Because the judge just found out that he gave all 50 people a lie. And we just discussed how the paperwork was a lie. As soon as he had the courtroom cleared, the next 50 guys came in and he harvested all of them because they didn't know they didn't know. He told me to get out of the courtroom. So the rest couldn't be harvested. So, but that's, I was in Milwaukee. I had a parking ticket. I sat there. A guy had a 125 mile an hour speed violation in a 55 zone and got $20 court costs. Because I was there to witness, and a judge can't commit a felony in front of the judge prosecutor. Everyone in the courtroom got $20 court costs in Milwaukee, was dismissed. And as soon as I walked out the courtroom door, the next group got, he had tinted windows, $88 fine and 4 points against his driver's license. I mean, it's pretty serious stuff. Drunk driving, 6 months in jail, $2,500 fine, which is normally just about a $300 fine. But he threw the book. They had to reharvest everything that he lost before that. All right, on my 2002 tape, and probably secondary and third, fourth, fifth, and sixth part of people telling the story over and over again and how it's been moved around the world. Puerto Rico, on my tape, I said that things are part of Puerto Rico. The post office is the UPU. The UPU controls, all post offices worldwide control the port authorities. Port authorities are the ones that pay the judges because they work in a foreign vessel in dry dock. So the port authorities are not off of the tax rolls because of it being classified as a foreign vessel. When you enter a courthouse, you have left your country. That's why no constitution, rule, or regulation in your country has anything to do with what's going on in that courthouse. I don't care if the judge has got a whole bunch of revised statutes from his state or his federal laws sitting on his desk. They are not part of the piece of paper that is your lawsuit with a stamp and a flag on it. That is the Constitution. That is the only reason why you're in court, is because you or the other party filed points of information on this document. If it's written in adverb verb, the judge is going to say both sides can't read and write. You're both derelict vessels on my foreign vessel in dry dock, and he will conduct himself accordingly based on subjective interpretation and what is fair and equitable for the volition of the thinking of the two parties before him. And if he thinks that both people are con artists and they're trying to rip off each other, he's going to allow the attorneys to go ahead and rip them off. That, comes from divorce. And if an individual is in there and he has a legitimate claim, physical evidence, quantumized arguments that are absolutely mathematical, the judge has no choice but to allow that individual to win his argument, because if he does anything like use the word dismiss, which is a negative condition of state within a quantumized document, which does not allow any negative condition of state to exist, he hasn't done anything. You can vacate, because vacate comes from value, but you can't dismiss it. Puerto Rico's got nothing to do with anything. If you want to do the IRS thing and say it belongs in Puerto Rico, I know I made that in my 2002 tapes, and that was through misinformation. Since then, I've corrected it on my website. It's the post office globally and the port authorities, which you're dealing with. Now, taxation in all countries worldwide, as society has evolved, you go to the polls and you elect public officials, or you will elect specific laws, rules, and regulations to be put on the ballots. Just like it used to be legal to smoke in an enclosed area anywhere in Australia. Today it's against the law because it violates public safety as far as all different kinds of illnesses that come from smoking. Same thing isn't true in the United States. We have the same laws. Some states haven't enacted all of them yet, but like 60% of all people that live in Florida are over the age of 60. Their immune systems are weaker than a 20-year-old. And therefore the laws in Florida say there is no smoking in any enclosed area anywhere in the state. Not in bars, bowling alleys, restaurants. But in the northern regions of the country where you have a young population, smoking laws are still there because young people like to smoke, and they haven't passed those laws yet in our states. But it's coming where it's becoming nationalized. You don't get federal aid if you have smoking in your state, so the state goes ahead and they pass the laws accordingly. In other words, they're blackmailed into it. There was comments made about the $400 million that was won at the World Court in the Jeb Skiba cases. Those were all disqualified by me. That never happened. That was misinformation that was circulated. And I went to The Hague and I personally got the lawsuits, and they were all disqualified. So that never took place. There was never any banking monies transferred or judgments paid out on any of that stuff. Skiba was indicted by the Boston grand jury, and because he's a friend of mine, Boston grand jury did an adverb verb indictment meaning no. Well, I'll spell it for you. That's the way they spelled indictment from the grand juries. And what that says is, I is an adverb, modifies the adjective N, which modifies the pronoun D, which is connected by the adverb I, which is connected by the adjective C, the adjective T, the pronoun M, the adverb E, the adjective T, and the pronoun T. Because it's underlined and the continuance of evidence is broken, this here, all letters in the alphabet are facts. Your vowels become, the I's are vowels, and but they're used as adverbs in this argument. And I and E's are interchangeable. So what they've done here is they've done a 134, a 1334, a 134. It's not a word. It's an acronym of misinformation. And when I corrected it, this happened in Frank Marfino's case for $1.3 million and 17 years in prison for failure to pay taxes between the ages of 18 and 34. I was then called in and I took the witness stand. This is a very unique story. The judge was fired for 2 years because of it. I took the witness stand and I said, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I have a question for you. DA jumps up and says, Mr. Miller, you cannot ask questions of the jury. I says to the DA, I says, well, if I can't ask the jury questions, I can't qualify if they're smart enough to understand my answers. The judge says, Mr. Miller, you can't ask the question of the jury. I says, well, then I'll ask you the question, Your Honor. I says, and you ask the jury. It's your court. You've got ruling on that. He says, yeah, it's my court. He says, I'll tell you what, Mr. Miller. He says, this question, if I don't like to question, will you spend 6 months in jail? Yeah, no problem. He says, it's really that important that this question be asked of the jury. I says, absolutely. I says, if you don't ask the jury this question, how are they supposed to know what I'm saying to them? And the judge goes, well, it must be a pretty important question if you're willing to spend 6 months in prison over it. And the district attorney stands up and says, I object, Your Honor. Mr. Miller's not allowed to talk to a jury. He says, overruled. He says, Mr. Miller, you will whisper in my ear the question, and I will then ask the jury. So I whispered in the judge's ear, and the judge goes, you know, that's a really good question. He goes, I would really love to see the answer. He says, if I don't like your answer after you ask the jury the question. No, he says, if you don't have an answer for me after I ask the jury a question, I am going to sentence you to 6 months in prison if I don't like your answer. And I says, so be it. He says, okay, we have a contract. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'd like to see a show of hands. Does 2 + 2 = 4? And all 12 hands went up. I says, and I blurted out, does TO plus TOO equal FOR? Does TWO and TO equal FORE? The DA jumps up and says, Your Honor, I like to hold Mr. Miller in contempt for making fun of the jury. I says, what do you mean I made fun of the jury? You spelled indictment with underlining each letter. You misrepresented the value of this word, and these people thought that there was an indictment against Frank Marfino. I says, by your own trickery of syntax, and you wrote the documents in adverb verb, and the IRS supplied you with information in adverb verb, you both acted in a conspiracy to obstruct this jury. And this jury didn't know any better because you read off what you were here for today. So you committed a fraud in syntax, you committed a fraud in communication skills, you committed a fraud in 2 + 2 = 4. I says, this jury would know an apple from an orange. I says, based on syntax. And then the jury jumps up, not the jury, the IRS jumps up and says, we have no claim against Frank Marfino. And then the DA jumps up and says, well, my claimant has now withdrawn all charges. I have no claims against Mr. Frank Marfino. The judge stands up and says, Frank, there's no charges against you. You're free to go. You don't owe them any taxes. You're not going to jail. You're a free man. Mr. Miller, get out of my court. You got 15 seconds, and I'm going to have you arrested for trespassing as a derelict vessel in dry dock. So I proceeded to walk out of the courtroom, and then he said, Frank, Do you know what was just said? Frank goes, no. He says, what do you mean? You don't have any knowledge of what just happened here today? He goes, no. He says, Mr. Miller has the knowledge. He says, and I copied him. Oh, you cheated. You copied. You don't have knowledge. Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 12B1s. I hold you in contempt of court for perjury, as you came to this court under false pretenses and you don't know what you're doing. 18 months in jail. And he went to jail for perjury.
The judge.
The judge sentenced him to 18 months. But as soon as he vacated the case, he recused himself from the trial and then started under judge's motion a new trial to hold Frank Martinfino in contempt for copying and not having knowledge. And from that day forward, every judge in America used the rules and regulations of knowledge to certify if you are qualified to come into court and make an argument. So if you're going to write a syntax document and correct a fiction document and identify the facts on that as to be a lie, you better know how to walk and chew gum at the same time, just like I do in this program. And then, see, don't even challenge me anymore because the only thing they do is get beat up and really highly embarrassed. By the way, the judge on this case, Pregeson, his father is the Grand Masonic Master of the entire state of California and the Chief Judge of the Supreme Court of California. His father had to fire his son because I testified in court under syntax and used a fact in court and vacated a jury, as well as a DA in the Internal Revenue Service. No one in the history of California ever defeated the IRS or a jury, and the fact that I could go in and blow these guys out of the water, and I do it every time I walk into court, it became a danger to allow me even into the courthouse, let alone into a courtroom or even file a lawsuit. And I've got worldwide reputation for that. That's why you guys you hear so many stories about me out here in Australia and New Zealand. But it's always fun when I go to court. Any questions?
Dave, if we get skillful enough to write in syntax and we turn up to court and correct documents and ask the other party why they've fraudulently conveyed language and committed mail fraud and all the other things, we notice them of that and of all the penalties, can't they turn the tables on us? Because if we've written to them in adverb verb, or we've even signed documents in adverb verb...
You're not held to a high standard. You're not a licensed bar attorney that went to college for 6 years to study how to mechanically and mathematically create fraud. They're held to a high standard. You're not. Simple as that.
It's a culpable action on their behalf, is it?
Yes.
You apologize.
It's engineered. It's not an accident. It's a mathematical engineer.
In the word indictment, you said 134, 133, 4134. They only just sent individual letters. How do we know?
Because it's underlined. It's the underlining in the space between underlined, because it's a word, a letter, a space, and another letter, and it's specifically broken with an underline. If it would have been a continuous line, that would have been a different story, but he specifically underlined it to separate each letter to be a separate entity. Because all words in the alphabet are, not all words, all letters of the alphabet are nouns, and it says so. You can look at any dictionary in the world. They identify them to be nouns, but A and I and E and O and U are used as independent letters, and they have multiple definitions.
So the vowels.
The vowels change or have values. It's like I is a person, A is a conjunction. I is also a conjunction.
So what makes an adjective, and what makes...
Because when you put a noun in front of a noun, it becomes an adjective pronoun. It's a modifier. It colors it. Even though you don't think N is a color, but when you do it in this format, this is called a syntax. This is specific engineered syntax, and you can't pay attention to the fact that this is a D and this is a N and a D. The fact is that if you put a noun in front of a noun, this is an adjective, and you have to have an adverb in front of that to make this a pronoun, and then it has to be connected by an adverb. That's the syntax, and the syntax says that this is a lie, that this is not the word indictment. It's just a series of letters that were written independently with a fraudulent syntax, with a modified condition of syntax, and not a word.
And the fact that they were underlined indicates that a person who did it understands syntax.
Exactly. It was an engineered lie to a jury. He lied to a jury and I caught him. That's perjury. And when you obstruct a jury, you're looking at 10 years in prison. The judge got fired over this for 2 years. And Douglas, his clerk of the court, was fired right along with him because he's the puppet master. And 2 years later, Ferguson and his clerk of the court was back in the Danny case, and guess who walked into the courtroom? Me. He wasn't even on the bench a week. And I come walking in and I sit down.
Oh, no.
And then Douglas goes, Judge, Miller's here again. And the Danny case went on for 6 weeks, and we won the case. I mean, they did everything in their power to get these people to talk to him. And the only thing the Danny's had to say, there were 6 of them involved, to the prosecuting attorney was, can I see the correct sentence structure, communication, syntax? To the judge, to the prosecuting attorney, and to the jury for 6 consecutive weeks, never broke and said anything but, can I see the correct sentence structure? And in the end, they vacated the case. 18 months later, they intimidated them enough to get lawyers. And the minute they got lawyers, it was about a week later, they all went to prison for 3.5 years because their lawyers silenced them from using syntax and volunteered for them to go to jail and put them all in jail.
Nice solicitors.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the word, you've got the C and the T. Well, how come the C didn't become a modifier for the T, for the other noun, for the phone?
Because M, anytime you can have a whole bunch of nouns, I can have 20 adjectives in front of a pronoun. But I can't have, a pronoun can't be in front of a pronoun. Only an adjective can appear in front of a pronoun, and the only thing that can follow a pronoun is an adverb. These are rules and regulations that cannot be violated in syntax.
So M is a pronoun.
M here is used as a pronoun because it's followed by an adverb.
Oh, it's affected from, of course.
Right, frontwards and backwards.
Right, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, g'day, David. My question's not exactly about
Yeah.
where we're at there. I have an international commercial shipping certification.
Right.
That's issued to me by a body called AMSA, which is the Australian Maritime Safety Authority. They issue a document called the STCW 95. You've got to go away and do a course, and you've got to do all kinds of things to get that. During that course, you know, they're getting you ready for your life out at sea, you know, doing commercial shipping. And they made a couple of points very, very clear to us at this course. And that was, basically your qualification became irrelevant because that just got logged on the system and you were. Your passport was irrelevant because you might be in a home port.
Right.
Okay? But the moment I step off my ship and I go down that gangplank and get onto that wharf and I want to walk back up that stairway and get back onto the ship, I need to make sure I've got one very important thing in my pocket.
Your medical certification that you are not transporting any contagious diseases.
And it's the most important piece of paper I have.
Public safety has jurisdiction over all things on planet Earth.
And I'd just like to make this point.
How many of you have seen some of these? There's a disaster movie where a plane comes from Europe and there's a terrorist on board releases a noxious a virus on board the plane. The plane is ordered to be vaporized by the military before it enters U.S. airspace. Rex Harrison, and Sophia Lorenz made a European movie, The Cassandra Crossing, where a train had a disease on board. It stopped, they sealed that train up, and they were going to destroy it at the Cassandra Crossing. But because they had a medical team on board the train, they realized that they could cure the disease with oxygen at 20% rather than 14.6, which is atmospheric, and saved everybody's lives, and were able to stop the train and prove that they didn't have to be disintegrated and killed. You know, everyone killed on board, and everybody's life was saved at the end of the movie. The point is that if the Black Plague, because it wiped out half the population of the world, or if you have what they call the devil virus, gets free, that viruses don't know any boundaries. There's been enough movies made about how a deadly virus can get free and destroy the population of mankind. The Omega Man is another one, the new one they just come out with. Let's see, what's another one they did? That the Omega Man was done with Charlton Heston, right? And then the new one is with Wilson.
So I guess my question is, David, when I board a foreign vessel in dry dock, the court.
The court is the same way. You walk into a foreign vessel in dry dock, I tell everybody, if you're going to do a syntax, because they arrested several of our people saying you have a mental disease and we're going to put you in a mental institution because you're a quantum in a world of fiction. You didn't know where you were. So what we did is we made sure all of our students went into the courthouse with a quantumized document and also had their medical papers saying they have no contagious diseases and are mentally sound. And so when the judge stood up there and made the comment, because he's the captain of his vessel, we held our medical papers up and says, we're board certified to be healthy. We know exactly who we are and what we're doing.
Thank you.
And that stopped that. And no one's been locked up anywhere in the planet for the last 10 years. So that was the only defense they had back then. But then we came back with, show me, Judge, your board certification that you're a doctor or you're a psychiatrist or you have any kind of mental training. And it disqualified them. So, another question.
David, when you mention the titles, like you mentioned 41A, etc., where do we find those? Are they American or Australian or?
Okay, all the titles, whether it be in your country, my country, China, Russia, doesn't matter where it's from. The piece of paper that we call the courthouse, you have to define your title. If I want to say Title 18, 241 is conspiracy, and I assign it a definition, it's just a reference within this document, and that's what it means, because I defined it with a quantum definition. I could say Title 18 USC 3 is conspiracy. I could say ABC equals conspiracy, as long as someplace where I take that abbreviation and I assign a definition to it on this vessel when this vessel goes into court. Now what I've done is I've taken their definitions, and their definitions when they are written, Title 42, that's the way the government writes it. Well, I went ahead and I said, well, that's not the right way. First off, it has to have a colon to make this is for the Title 42, and this is a hyphen, wrong way. Yeah, this is a hyphen tilde. The hyphen separates the word because tilde is a location. 42 is not a value. The government called it a value. It's a location where you find a definition. So I was grammatically correct and copyrighted the correct use of punctuation around the words, and when I copyrighted, a judge will look at that, he knows what his fiction side is, and I've already syntaxed it so he knows what the definition is corrected. And then it's assigned to my documents. That way I can communicate both in the fiction and fact world simultaneously. Now my copyrights in the United States, or rather my copyrights for this technology is worldwide. I don't care what government you go to, all courthouses are foreign vessels in dry dock, and you are not in Australia, you are not under Australia revised statutes or state of New South Wales statutes. You are whatever it says on that piece of paper. So if you go in there with a half-baked definition and a half-baked attitude and you don't know what you're doing, he will declare you to be a derelict vessel who doesn't know up, down, left or right, in or out, and he will harvest you for trespassing on his vessel. So don't make nonsense. If you file nonsense, it will be treated as nonsense. Yes?
So would you suggest that you notice the court in advance, 10 days in advance, of the court document that you plan to?
No, because when you file it, that tells the judge by contract that he's got 45 days to schedule it for a hearing based on the forensic evidence that's in that document. If he cannot vacate your ability to communicate at a level of mathematical accuracy, then he has to give you a court date. Now, from the time you file the papers, you're going to get a received document stamp, which starts a clock that runs for 30 days. At the end of 30 days, you must have within that 30-day window service upon the people that you are talking to, and that information of service back to the judge, and the judge then will issue a summons to answer the court within 20 working days. Saturdays and Sundays don't count in a state, and it's 60 days for federal because Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, they all count. But it all comes out to be a 45-day trust law then because they're giving you 45 working days of the 60. Now, the 60 days that they are talking about, that the federal courts always tell you that you've got an answer, is a trap. We don't give them 60. That's in their world of fiction. You take 45-day trust law, which vacates, you got 10-day answer and a 10-day answer back to the answer, that's 60 days. You vacate your own case because you don't know the difference as to what you're supposed to be doing. So you only allow 20 days for an answer, and because it's a syntax document, you set down the rules and regulations.
Can their answer
not them.
Can their answer be that they need more time?
Oh, don't give it to them.
Okay. Also,
they're going to ask, because the minute you waiver your time, your 45-day speedy trial, they can wait 10 years before they answer you back. They can't win in syntax, so the only thing they're going to do is tie it up in time. Don't give them the time.
Also, if we feel we're proficient enough to speak, to write in the truth, but maybe not to speak in it.
2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4. Speaking is irrelevant. Only what's written counts.
So you notice the court that you're happy to traverse in adverb verb?
The court's going to make a summary decision based on the forensic evidence that you present to them on paper.
Yep.
The only reason they're going to bring you into the court is trying to entrap you to disqualify your own paperwork. And
so you would speak in syntax to notice them that as it's written, say, shall it be?
9 out of 10 cases are done under summary judgment based on the forensic evidence of the lawsuit presented to the judge. It's only, if they want to put up a show for everybody, they'll go ahead and have a court hearing for it. Or if they know that there's a condition of perjury on the table, they'll get the man to confess to perjury. I can get anybody in this room to confess to perjury, and you won't even know it's happening. See, if you drop a frog into hot water, he'll jump out. If you drop a frog into cold water and bring it to a boil, you will cook him, and he won't know he's being cooked because he's cold-blooded. It's the same thing with the courtroom. If you make everybody feel warm and fuzzy, they're going to cooperate. If you shock them, they're going to get all scared and run away. So you want to be able to, you get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. Or flies.
The story you were relating before about the guy that had with the IRS,
Yeah.
and you won the case for him. After that, on his way out, the judge pulled him up because he wasn't familiar with what was going on. The judge was able to...
Right, I had
put him
about
in jail
6
anyway.
hours. I had 6 hours to give him a briefing as to what I was going to do.
How far can the judge go with that? For instance, if someone went to court, had you representing them in court, but didn't understand to the extent that you do, and the judge was questioning that person. And
Okay,
if that person makes a mistake and he say, well, you don't know what you're doing. David might, but you don't.
Right,
So-
Baden's case happened over in New Zealand that way, and Baden admitted he couldn't walk and talk like I did, and the judge had him for breakfast. In the Krummemeyer case, which is up on the internet under scams, Krummemeyer went to prison for 3 years under he was in an IRS case. We defeated the IRS case because the language was a lie. But 10 minutes before he was sentenced, I found out that he had cashed $800,000 in insurance checks, which were never made public to me, but the DA's office kept it secret until he made his final delivery, saying, you didn't pay taxes on the insurance checks. You laundered money. You lied to the court and to the jury that you didn't have any checks. I've got $800,000 in checks you signed. I'm going, well, that's perjury. So he got sentenced to 3 years, 4 counts of perjury, which was 30 years in prison, and they only give 10%. So he got 3 years of hard time in a federal penitentiary. But this is the 3rd time he's gone to prison over perjury for IRS claims on checks. You think he'd learned the first time.
In that case, I can understand. But if you were to represent someone else, like for instance the cases that you've done here in Sydney with the children and everything, couldn't the judge do the same in all those cases, saying, well, the person that you're defending doesn't know what you're doing, or doesn't understand?
All the people that I have gone to court with have been briefed by me and have spent probably 10 hours of pre-headbanging with me to know what I am doing, so they understand what is going on.
Yeah, but not to your extent. It doesn't matter if if the judge.
They still
questions them,
can't
makes
walk
a
the walk
mistake.
and talk the talk as to my extent.
No.
But the fact that I disqualified the court and everything that they're doing in the court can't move forward. Doesn't matter whether you can read or write. The court doesn't have any jurisdiction in the first place once they were disqualified. I'll be in court March 2nd, as a matter of fact, down in Sydney, in Dr. Massoud's case. For anybody here from Sydney and you want to go to court and watch me. Yes, Sam?
You said you can do You're making me feel self-conscious now. You said you can disqualify and get people to admit for perjury by using the process of, was it the...
Cross-examination.
Cross-examining and
Right.
catching them with honey by making them feel good about themselves and getting them to answer the questions, and then when you ask the last one, they caught themselves and you
Right.
catch them in the act. But, and you also mentioned about the fact that the judge will only make a finding on the facts. I mean, it is my understanding that the judge can actually accept evidence, verbal evidence, according to their system. Can the judge admit verbal evidence and ignore, can the judge admit verbal evidence from the bar
And ignore the written contract?
that can be used to disqualify the syntax?
What you're saying is, yes, the individual can kill his own case by saying, I don't know what's happening because somebody else wrote this for me. That
Not
statement will
necessarily.
disqualify.
Sorry?
That evidence will disqualify. And I'll tell everyone in this room right now, I don't need your permission to prosecute the judge for anything he does to you. I have knowledge, and they know I have knowledge, and I can go into court over your objections to my interfering with your case and prosecute the judge and the DA for violating your civil rights because you can't read and write. And I have that authority. I can do that in any country worldwide.
So the judge can't use his intelligence against you, like I've seen. What's that woman on TV all the time at 2:30?
Judge Judy?
I've seen her violate several basic human rights.
No, she didn't. The first thing that starts out in that all those TV judges are saying is, these people signed a contract to vacate their civil rights, vacate their contract rights, and allow the judge to make a determination over to their oral arguments in court of common sense. And those are just common sense trials. Sometimes they have very good arguments. You might pick up a few points to pay attention to. Other days, there ain't a court in the world allow a circus to take place like that. It's totally up to the discretion of the judge. And we had a judge up in Wisconsin. He got disbarred, as a matter of fact, and it was found guilty of sexual crimes. But he'd walk around with the old ping pong paddles with a little ball with a rubber band on it. In a murder trial, he'd walk around and he'd play with this thing because both sides were talking in adverb verb, the contracts were in adverb verb, the jury couldn't read and write, and he knew about syntax, and he knew that all these people were illiterate in front of him, so he just played with this rubber ball paddle.
He was bored.
And everybody thought he was nuts. And then when he was challenged by the chief judges, he said, well, these guys can't read and write. It's a syntax argument. I'm not going to tell them anything. I'm just going to do what I'm going to do at the end of the trial. I don't care what the jury says. He says they're in a box. It's an enclosed area. They can't hear evidence or see witnesses. I'll make a determination after the fact. And if I don't want to put my foot in there, I'll let the jury do whatever they want to do. And if I don't like what they do, I'm going to override them. And I'm going to make my own decision anyways. I had a case where the jury came back and said, this man is not guilty. The judge says, listen, ladies and gentlemen, you don't seem to understand. I told you to go back in there and find this person guilty. That's not a request, that's an order. You will find them guilty as charged, or you're going to sit in there for as many months as it takes. And they kept the jury in there for a week, 24 hours a day. Wouldn't let them out of the jury room until they came back with a guilty. And no matter how many times they had to keep fighting and fighting and fighting, and finally they all gave in and they said, okay, we find you guilty, so they could go home to their families. So then the judge got sued by the Greater Jury Association for fraud. The jury, when it got to the higher court, the judge went in and said, everybody lied. It was an adverb-verb case. Syntax was on the table and they all lied. They're all guilty. He may not have been guilty of the crime that they said he was, but he was guilty of lying on multiple counts of perjury, which added up to more time for perjury than he did for the guilty for what he was actually in court for.
A bit like Al Pacino.
So he wanted to use a distraction. He didn't want Syntax being put on trial. He didn't care what was put on trial. He was just going to put this guy in jail because he lied to the court and the judge knew it. See? But he didn't want to give out any secrets, so he changed the rules. Okay? All right. I'll get back on point here. This here is a graph. Your mind, now this is the same, these are the title sites are in the back of the business card. These are the words. Now, the numbers can be anything you want throughout any country you happen to go through, but the causes of action of these conditions of words follow in a specific order. Now, you have to be able to prove each one of these words through the title site and the definitions which are expanded upon on both the website and my book if you wish to study those. So the question is, these are the players. You got your judge who works with the DA barrister, who works with the sheriff bailiff, who works with the clerk of the courts, who files papers, and then the police department who goes out and investigates on the street or is your professional witness. Now, let's say this pen is a knife. Okay, now a knife, the word knife is a... Let's say this pen is a knife. Okay, now a knife, the word knife is a fact, or the word gun is a fact. And it's laying here, and the police officer picks it up and he says, the gun. Doesn't say for the gun, by the gun, of the gun, for the person's gun. He just says the gun. Does an adverb making gun a verb. The noun, or the fact, killed the person, but the verb was what was presented to the jury. That's misrepresentation. Wow. So therefore, this person here misrepresented his court, his files. All clerks must have a 4-year college degree in order to be a clerk of the court. To be port authority officers, to receive the vessel to be docketed at the port of the court. Now, when it's docketed, the clerk will usually look at it to see what department it goes to or reads it, but allows the modification of language from the police to come into the court, and then it goes to the Sheriff's Department, Detective Bureau to do a further investigation, maybe check up on things at a secondary level before it's given to the barrister or DA, District Attorney, to go out and then find the laws, rules, and regulations to fit the definitions that were brought to establish the violations of civil rights. Okay? And then those points of information will be given to the judge. If the modification of language from the police officer and the clerk and the sheriff are not stopped and corrected because they can't read and write and they cheated on their civil service exams, high school exams, and they're all part of the conspiracy, and the DA doesn't stop and correct it before he gets it to the judge, these guys all work together. None of them can read and write. It's just a big act. So, are they guilty? Do they have knowledge? Well, I take their paperwork and I syntax it and I prove that everybody who touched this piece of paper in all things from the street to the jury and back to the finished order from the judge making a determination that it's a lie. It's a syntax lie. Did they have knowledge? Absolutely, because it was mathematically certified by every one of them. It wasn't just where one made the mistake, they all made the same mistake. They all acted together. If we don't lie together, we will lay together. So they all lie together. All right, now you have to give closure. Did any of these individuals give closure that they were going to use the modification of language to extort rights or to obstruct the information that was presented in the courtroom? The answer is no. None of them stopped to give closure as to use syntax to define the words and prove that they were wrong. So the closure of every one of these individuals participated. Did they port the knowledge into the court? In other words, did they docket the evidence? Yes, they were all guilty of docketing evidence to go ahead and damage somebody through fraud. Did they all participate in fiction language? The answer is yes. I have everyone that touched the documents had to sign off, so we have a signed confession that they all participated. And did they now port a correction? Once you have to give closure and port it, then you have to certify the fiction modification and port it. Yes, they all put it in. They all signed on to it. Did anybody stop and correct it? Nope, I do. Now, did they act together in a conspiracy? Anytime two or more people participate on a wrongdoing, you have a conspiracy. Now, that comes under Title 18, Section USC 3. That's an association after the fact that a fraud has been perpetrated and all individuals participated together to make that fraud go forward without obstructing. Title 18 USC 3. So the conspiracy first is brought as a civil. After the civil is argumented, then it's responsibility of the DA's office to go back and criminally prosecute everyone under conspiracy criminal, which carries a 15-year prison sentence and $15,000 fine. But when they modify language to extort money and privileges, it now goes up to $25 million and 30 years in prison. My program, however, carries 1,225 years of prison time and I think it's up to $60 million in fines. Yeah, I only got to prove one to get all of it, which is easy to do. Okay, now, did they obstruct? Absolutely. They obstructed evidence, they obstructed witnesses, they obstructed paperwork because they modified everything from the original facts. Now, did they deprive the individual from having a correct trial, correct information, correct evidence, correct due process? The answer is yes. And so all these get checked off. Did they all act together to reduce this individual beyond the point of recovery, to put him in a box in orange pajamas? The answer is yes. That's a 30-year prison sentence, Rico. Was the guy damaged? Well, I only got to prove one for damage, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times 5. I got 50 damages. Is the guy damaged? Yeah, I think a jury would pretty well sight through that. Because you've got a chart on a whiteboard in front of a jury to make and take all the evidence, syntax it, define it, and educate a jury of 12. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that somebody lied, that somebody damaged, that the court was just an illusion. Now, if the guy committed murder, rape, major drug dealer, did some other kind of hideous crime, bank robbery, beat somebody to death, you know, there are certain crimes in society. It doesn't matter what the language is, doesn't matter what the jurisdiction is, these people will be removed from society. They can't get out of it. There's no tricks or traps in truth or fiction that are going to get you, that are going to allow you to stay in society if you violate public safety. You know, there's a Star Trek episode where this individual, who was a lady, has knowledge of a deadly virus that's going to be released on a planet to genocide the planet because two planets are at war. And Picard and the doctor are sitting there and they're discussing, why won't you tell us about this? He says, well, because I have to maintain confidence with my clients. And there's a war going on, and you have no jurisdiction to detain me. And the doctor says, well, you know what? A person would have to be crazy to go out and kill a whole planet. Therefore, as a doctor, I have to medically certify that you're crazy because you're going to kill somebody. And therefore, we have to lock you up in a box, in a straitjacket for the rest of your natural life. Or you can cooperate with us and tell us what we know. And the doctor has jurisdiction over the captain and over any other planet under public safety. That was brought out. I think that was in Evolutions. They brought that out because the Borg were going to go back to violate the time-space continuum to remove a certain issue. You see, so the public safety issue is still number one on the board, whether it be a Navy a man entering a ship at sea or coming onto land. And throughout the airport, they have cameras everywhere watching people. Those cameras are now equipped with heat sensors. If you're walking through and you're glowing, I guarantee you the ATF are going to walk up to you and say, you have a fever, you have an infection. We don't know what you are, but you're going in quarantine. You're not going to get on this plane. You're not going to leave the country. You're not going to come into the country. So, you know, everybody's watching. There's always somebody watching. Technology today is to a level where they can stop diseases from being transported because you can, they've established the fact that a terrorist doesn't necessarily have to carry anything. He just has to inject himself to be deadly and then move between point A and point B. And then when he gets there, he is the weapon. So they have all this new sophisticated equipment up there to monitor individuals between what is normal and what is not normal and then remove these people before they have a chance. There's another thing for all those who, if you don't have the technology established here now, it is coming in the next few weeks. I was in LA airport and the siren goes off. You got signs up everywhere. When the buzzer rings, you will freeze. You will become a statue. If you move, you will be shot. And a lady's phone rang, and she went to grab for it, and she got tackled by 2 ATF agents. Because she moved, and everyone, I mean, you got 10 lines of people going through inspection, and the siren goes off because somebody moved or did something, or they saw a device that was suspicious, and before anybody could even move their finger to push a button, which would activate a detonator, anybody moves, they get shot, and everybody's got their guns out. So if you walk into an airport and you see these signs, when the buzzer goes off, you better become a statue, and if you move, you could get shot. Because you're no longer in Australia. You're in a UN territory under a threat of terrorism. And everyone is a suspect. And so if you're going to, because I travel as much as I do and I move in this world, I learn how to survive. And you're all guilty until proven innocent.
I used to be a private investigator, and they taught us that we have to write the reports in such a way that whoever reads it, their attitude should be, bring the guilty bastard in, we'll give him a fair trial. Okay, you mentioned that all these things can be proven from one breaking of the law. So I want to confirm, does that mean that one document in adverb verb that's presented to the judge, that the judge uses to make a finding on, is enough to tick all these boxes you have here?
That's it right there. Anything times a lie is a lie. Any times 0 is a 0. Anything divided by 0 is a 0.
So you've just given us the formula for winning
100%
apart from
of everything.
a criminal action, any civil action not done in quantum.
Absolutely. Why do you think they're so upset?
Am I allowed to swear? Thank you. There was... Oh, I do have one other question.
Oh, and then the question is for the district attorney while I'm on the witness stand. So, Mr. Miller, you mean to say that we are going to let murderers, bank robbers, and rapists go free because we didn't use the correct syntax? My answer back was, why didn't you use the correct syntax in the first place so I don't have to come here and defend such a thing? You're the guy that went to college for 10 years. You're the guy that created the laws who were obstructed. Why didn't you fix it? I fixed it. I gave it to you. Why don't you fix it? You've got the answers. Fix it. And the judge says, there'll be no further questions, Judge Miller. He's making an ass out of the DA. Yes.
I have a question somebody's asked me to ask you. Yesterday you put it in a box or in some sort of pyramid style.
It's a triangle, folks. It's got 3 sides. A pyramid has 5 sides. There's 4 sides to the pyramid, and it has a base.
That was a triangle.
That was a triangle.
Okay.
I could have used a circle and just wrote the numbers around a circle and put it in the middle. The point is you have 3 elements. You will always be correct. You will honor your correctness. And there you will find your, you will make a contract, and you'll write a correct contract, and you'll honor the correct contract.
Okay. What's the first one?
The first one, you have contract, honor, and duty.
Okay.
You know what duty means? It's not.
Responsibility?
Huh?
Responsibility?
No, responsibility means no spoken. But responsibility and duty is quantum, responsibility is adverb verb. It's a lie.
Duty is something you must do.
A duty is a contract that you are sworn to uphold because you have an oath and a contract definition to perform that oath. That's why military personnel have duties. Civilians have responsibilities. Civilians are on a different plane than military. And military are under contract, and you have duties. And in a civilian world, you have orders, which means no contract. And in the duty of a military, you have commands, C-O-M, contract commands. If you don't follow your command, you get a bullet in the brain. In civilian, they put you in a box.
Okay. So how does that affect what type of God you believe in?
What kind of a God do I believe in? The God that I have researched to 1,000 definitions that are unique to my understanding, which none of you are privy to because you weren't there when I studied my 1,000 definitions, which I syntaxed. You guys all studied your 1,000 definitions that were all separate from each other, so all of you have an independent definition of what God is, the same as the other 6 billion people out there who have their 6 billion gods. So the point is, everyone is unique. God is created in man's image. The synonyms of image is imagination, art, and creation. End of story. It can't get any simpler than that. It only takes 15 seconds to explain it. Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify something I think you said yesterday in relation to now working for the American military. Was it to put in place something in syntax to prevent them from any future prosecution against, was it genocide, war crimes, things like that?
Well, okay. As muster master, what is a muster? A muster is an individual when you go on a cruise ship. You'll go to your muster stations, learn how to put on a life jacket, where to go to your lifeboats in the event the boat sinks after Titanic. Number 2, you get onto an airplane. For those of you who have flown, the stewardess tells you how to put on a life jacket, how to put on a seat belt, what to do in the event the plane's going to crash. That's a muster. All musters are marshals. All airline stewardesses and personnel on cruise ships, which are musters, are also U.S. Marshals. What does the word U.S. mean? United States Marshals. 2 or more people coming together in a closed area called a vessel, better known as charter vessel. Charter vessel means you paid, you get a receipt, bill of lading, you become cargo on a vessel. The cargo could be a ship, a plane, a train, a bus. That's why you always get a receipt. You get on your city bus. You're on a charter vessel. You paid money, which made you a postal employee traveling under the Department of Transportation as a vessel, which now became cargo on the bus, or the train, or the plane, or the boat, and so on. And it's all about maritime commerce and contracts.
I'm a bit lost. How do you mean, though, in relation to, because if I understood it correctly yesterday, I may have misunderstood it, it sounded like in your working with them, it prevented them from any prosecution against
No, what I said was, in the event a foreign government hires their lawyer to write an adverb verb claim, which I can syntax and say it doesn't say anything, against anybody, and it doesn't matter if it's the United States military. I have 8 treaties with 82 countries for this effect.
Okay.
In the event any country sues another country and they don't use the correct syntax, they're disqualified.
Right, so if any military from any part of the world do commit some
That
sort
I
of
have a
war
treaty
crime,
with, I will uphold my responsibilities and I will syntax it and I will prove beyond all reasonable doubt that it's either correct or incorrect.
Good, okay, thank you.
You know, the World Trade Center, when it went down, took out 3,800 people. There were 3,800 lawsuits filed for wrongful death. All 3,800 people who filed those claims put their name in uppercase spelling, called a nom de guerre dead person. I took one case on, called with the Mariana was the lady's name. Her husband died at the World Trade Center. And it was done as a syntaxed Title 42 lawsuit. That one lawsuit disqualified all 3,800 lawsuits. The government did not have to pay out $1 trillion. Because how do dead people say they've been damaged? Very simple. And they wrote it in adverb verb, which disqualified under syntax their arguments. Again, the United States government didn't have to pay out $1 trillion in damages. So, and the judge on that case, when I filed my case, it took only a couple of days and the whole thing went mute. There was no public announcements made about it. The whole World Trade Center and all the lawsuits just kind of disappeared because they can't advertise syntax and give it credibility on a global basis, because it would set up a chain reaction globally and disqualify insurances, money, banking, mortgages, contracts, trade agreements. In other words, it's Pandora's box being opened. That's why everything went mute. Same way as Bill Clinton's sex trial got sealed. They can't let it out. They can't let Pandora's box out of the bag at this point yet, till the whole world is brought up to speed simultaneously. So everything is being done covert, quiet, and allowing me to do these seminars. Yes.
Yeah, they're just still gaining clarity on the title, Title 41, 42. So are they actually in your book?
Yes, everything's in there. There's a whole section on titles, whole section on dictionaries.
I can't find them in.
Every single law, there's 2 lawsuits in there, civil, the divorce, in the back of each one of those. As you read through it, you'll see them specifically listed. They'll say Title 42, knowledge. Every single time I use a title cite, I also assign the definition to it, a short definition.
And these titles...
And then there's expanded definitions in there on each one of the titles and what they mean.
So when we refer to a title, I know you said like we would do the tilde and with a number.
Right.
And these are written in quantum.
Yes.
Where's the original ones? Are they part of?
The original ones in the United States codes or in your Australian codes are all written in adverb verb. If you use them, it's nonsense.
In what sort of law? What?
In any law, anything written in adverb verb is nonsense.
I mean the title. Trying to still understand where titles come from.
This is a closed area. the way you define your words in here, you're telling a specific, using the correct sentence structure, communication syntax, to identify what the words mean on your lawsuit. Not only do you have a definition assigned to a Title 42, 1986 for knowledge of the law and the right to stop and correct it, but you also have every word. What does the word knowledge mean? What does the word correct mean? What does the word and mean? Or mean? Is, are. All these words have to be defined independently as well as in a complete sentence to be associated with that number, Title 42, 1986. Title 42, 1986 says, in order for evil to flourish, good men must do nothing. If you witness a crime and you don't stop and correct it, then you're a party to the crime.
If we were to...
Your country has the same laws as we do. All countries in the world have that same law.
And where would I find that law in Australia?
You'd have to go and look it up. In your revised statutes. Australian revised statutes.
Statutes. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, common law, criminal code would be one place. Civilian code. Usually all you have to do is type in the word knowledge under Wikipedia, and it'll take you to a definition of knowledge. It might even give you a title site. Now, if you go into Black's Law Dictionary and you look up the word knowledge or criminal or conspiracy, you will have specific lawsuits with the case law. But the case law is written in adverb verb. It will also give you the title sites for those. And then that is cross-referenced through a central library on Lexis and Nexis, which is a worldwide internet for judges and attorneys and barristers in all languages. And you've got to be a member of Lexis and Nexis or an attorney with a code to get into that. Okay? It's not open to the public. They don't want the public being able to do their job for them. Question?
You said public safety was the #1 law or rule or whatever. So how come with what happened in 9/11, it was a controlled thing? How come that was a massive public safety breach, obviously?
They declared it to be an act of war so that they could avoid all the public safety issues, wrongful death, poisoning half of New York City with asbestos. And you know, the asbestos argument has never been made public to anybody, even though we got 50,000 people dying of cancer right now in New York City from asbestos exposure from the World Trade Center coming down, and all the smoke that you saw was all asbestos being blasted all over the whole city. Talk about population reduction.
So how come everyone didn't notice the Arabs planting bombs in the buildings weeks before?
Yeah, it didn't have technology like that. That wasn't an issue of a bomb. That was an issue of taking and creating an electromagnetic pulse. That kind of technology goes into people who own a C4. You see, the Department of the Pentagon that was destroyed is where all the black ops is practiced. All the guys that deal in C4. What's the first rule of the assassin? Kill the assassin. So you get everybody together that was involved with that in the Pentagon and then kill everyone, 186 guys in the same location. Anybody else that slipped through the cracks, they're going to be so afraid they'll never talk. Conspiracy theories.
What Arabs? Big one?
You know, it's like I was at the Pentagon the day after a 737, 173-foot wingspan created an 8-foot hole, considering the fuselage is 20 feet across. You figure that one out with no airplane parts around it. How did people, why are people gullible like that? I just can't understand it. Or Flight 93. The only plane in history to crash in the ground, making a hole 50 feet deep and 100 feet wide with no airplane parts around except one 50-pound piece of aluminum, which I think somebody brought and threw it on the ground. Even the titanium motors, which have melting, which are specifically built, the blades are specifically built by Rolls-Royce, and they can withstand temperatures of 3,200 degrees. They all vaporize too. And there was no airplane residue, not even fuel residue. Everything disappeared. Must have flew through a vortex. Yes.
Just a couple of questions about stamps, David. Values, the stamp values. When do we use whole denominations?
I always use whole denominations because if there's any discrepancy about fractions, there's no such thing as a fraction in law.
That's right. That's
Don't
right.
open it up. 1873 for a 2-cent stamp. You could mail anything anywhere. That law has never changed. You can put a 2-cent stamp on any letter and send it anywhere in the world. It'll get there eventually. And they can't demand any more than 2 cents because that was the original postal treaty. But if you want to get it there and you don't want any hassles, put the right postage on it.
Sure.
It's just easier.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
I guess I'm still trying to get my head around the whole concept of, not to get off topic, but you doing what you do and being allowed to continue doing it, still with things like 9/11 taking place, them showing that whichever the powers that be who orchestrated that are prepared to go to such lengths to kill people. Why would they see a language coming into the system as a better way than what they've done for so long as it is, and that's just killing people, controlling them, manipulating them, keeping them in fear? Why would this... I know you said it'll make
A
them more
lot of
money.
people have not heard the program, don't even know it exists.
Yep.
And these are people that are still don't know, and are still out there doing what they do because that's the only thing they do know.
Yep.
Once they've been exposed to this program, whether they accidentally get on the internet, have seen a videotape, been to a seminar, they absolutely can't go back and look themselves in the mirror today and say, I'm going to make a living becoming a liar. Just doesn't work. You're going to get caught. Everybody gets caught that lies. So, it's just, you know, with 400 million people already out there with this information, and it's only going to be a couple more years, and I'm going to have 51% of the population, and they're going to vote in correctness.
I can understand that, but I guess I'm thinking that they would be aware of that, so why would they allow you to continue that?
Because there's nobody that can replace, there's nobody out there qualified to do what I'm doing at a level to which I do it at. I've answered all your questions, don't I? Who else is going to stand up here and answer your questions on all the different topics you guys come up with?
Yep,
And I've been doing that for 940 seminars. So it's, in itself, it's an impossible task that I've made possible. I says, sure, anybody wants to do what I'm doing, fine. Stephen does it. And he, you know, if he doesn't know the answer, Stephen will say one thing. And this will go back to a story with Henry Ford, president of Ford Motor Company. I tell this at all the seminars. A young executive walks up to Henry Ford at one of the big shareholders meetings, and he's got all these big, important vice presidents around him, and says, Mr. Ford, may I ask you a question? Ford says, well, of course you can. And everybody goes silent. He says, what's the answer to this problem? He says, you advertise the fact that you know the answers to everything. He says, yeah, that's correct. So the man asks him a question. He says, phone, punches it up, calls his brains, his think tank of 200 IQs, asks the questions, I need the answer in 15 seconds, gets the answer back, tells it to the man. Is that the correct answer? He says, yes, it is. He says, but you didn't know the answer. He says, but I know where to look. Oh, and by the way, you're fired.
Okay, just one final question. I guess it's just to appease my own sense of, I guess, good and bad as best you can judge it as an individual. Does your syntax language in any way facilitate stopping any future criminal proceedings against people who have in the past done crimes against humanity?
No, not at all.
So it can...
Fiction in, fiction out. Fact in, fact out.
Okay.
And if an individual committed a crime and he thinks he's going to use truth to legalize his crime, and he knew it was a crime, because he'll actually convict himself in his cross-examination of his argument. And if the government needs me, I don't care who you are, if you think you're smart enough to talk in syntax, I can get you to confess to anything in about, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 seconds.
Okay.
I've got the knowledge to put the words together, and you'll feel all warm and fuzzy and participate.
Thank you.
I think it's a very small percentage of the population that understand the truth. How do you see the transition of the world waking up to this? Because when I first found out about the truth 18 months ago or so, I was pretty pissed off. So how do you see the masses, if there is a 10 people knowing 10 people and an explosion of information that they've been lied to for 8,500 years, how do you see that being managed? Or how do you see that transition?
Because people will only move as fast as their ability to comprehend an issue. When the judges and I get together, like I said yesterday, people are lazy. As long as they have their TVs and their beer, they don't care where the tank parks. They will study for a while and they'll get tired. They'll go and experiment with a half-truth and say it doesn't work because they don't have the full amount of information. Or they get tired or they don't have enough spine to complete the task and they just quit. They drop off. It's easier to be part. It's like the movie in The Matrix. One of the guys says, I'm tired of living in a crappy submarine, eating crappy food. I want to go back to my illusion and have a steak and be somebody important in my dream world. And people are that way. They made those statements in the movie Matrix because the average person who has sued the government or who has brought action against the government, as what you call the patriot groups or tax protester groups or anything else, they find that the individual has an attention span of 24 months. That's it. And they're gone. They go back to their own little world of an illusion. I've been at this 30 years. I am the longest running individual worldwide that has stood up against the matrix because I have syntax and I have continually promoted and expand and define the accuracy in all the different parts of the world that it's going to touch upon. Setting up the constitutions, Robert's Rules of Orders, getting the trusts together, getting the organized people to teach them how to use a trust, to create a organized body of thinking, to appoint judges and how to elect judges, how judges have to think to make a determination as to what is right and what is wrong and know when they're being lied to. And so there's 1,800 branches of government that have to be certified. But the first issue is you've got to have a contract to explain what your job titles are. And that's what I'm doing. I'm teaching the syntax to get to the contract and writing the contracts as fast as I can at my own expense, publishing them nationally, worldwide on my internet site, so that everyone can study equally at the same time. And I tell everybody, improve it. I'm one guy with a bunch of ideas. Get together and tear it apart. Make it better. Always make it better. Today is the first day of the rest of your life, and every day you will beat your own record. Improve, educate yourself, and you'll have a better world for both you and your children. Okay?
On the subject of stamps and the values that we use, we've got gold stamps, and then we're just talking about stamps with whole denominations and not using fractions. Now, we've had the instance where we use claim of the life and we use a gold stamp, and then in other documents we're using whole value stamps, but we have had occasion where we've used stamps like 55 cents. So,
yeah, I use 42-cent stamps on service documents. I put the $1 stamps on my court filings for docketing stuff.
so with the stamps that when
Still makes you a postmaster transporting the vessel.
when we've used a fraction, that would be because that stamp has already been authorised by the fiction as being valid for the transport of the vessel of paper
Right.
with the
In other
component
words, the governments have set up the fact that it costs 42 cents US and maybe 55 cents Australian to transport 1 ounce of weight, which is your Class A letter or first class mail, which has been established worldwide in all denominations. And it is, then you go to your foreign exchange and you have your exchange rates between countries and currencies.
So
And everything is directly proportional. It's the same worldwide.
So working with the reverse of that, if a court wasn't to accept your document because it had a 55 stamp on it, they'd have to be disqualifying the Universal Postal Union to do that.
Yeah.
So
And they're
that's all
paid
you
by the
need to
port
be aware
authorities
of.
and the judges are postmasters, so therefore they would be shooting themselves in the foot.
And then they're also acknowledging that you've actually carried out a correct process, but they're trying to find a hole in it and then that would expose the fact that they're never doing the right process with their
That's correct. And
documentation.
all the rest of the lawsuits would now become null and void by their own self-confession.
Okay, and it's time for a break.